session and um, mention just a couple of things real quickly. First off, next week we will do the session on Wednesday. I'm going to be off campus on Monday. I'm going to be checking on classes during the day and probably working on them some, but rather I would be in places that I can do the collaborate sessions. I don't know. Um, as I'm going to be out of town on Monday, and I just don't know how that might work. I'm going to have my car worked on to begin the day, and then Monday night I'm going to watch the Eagles concert in Greenville, South Carolina. That place in Greenville did major transmission work for me about 5 years ago and has maintained it since. And here's my chance to swing by and get them to service on it again. While I'm sitting there at their place, I can work on stuff. Sitting in their lobby, they have internet that works perfectly good, and that they have no problem with sitting there working on it. But that's not going to be a good environment to do a collaborate session in. And then I'm not sure how long I'm there that day or any of that. So, second thing, I am grading on the stuff that was due last Monday. Everything that was due before last Monday was graded through Friday. I did a little bit of grading during the weekend. That's supposed to be time off. I answered emails all weekend also, and I have answered emails today already. So I am going to work on grading once I finish this collaborate session, and when I get up to the school. Got to go check my mail and do one or two other things. And I got to run by the bank real quick too. And then this afternoon, I will be at the Whitfield Murray campus doing the cabling exercise again as a makeup additional time, which is noted in announcements. I'll be there from 4 o'clock till 7 o'clock. The school locks up at 8 o'clock, so if you are coming, I would definitely encourage you to be there by 6 or very soon thereafter, not wait till later. I intend to leave at 7, but if I have to stay over a little bit, I will, but the police are going to chase us out at 8 o'clock, so we can't stretch over real long after that. So I will be there doing that this afternoon. I know 2 students have scheduled with me to meet with me there. So if you haven't done it yet, here's an opportunity if you're near Whitfield Murray campus. Second one is I will be at Walker tomorrow and Thursday morning. I may not be there Thursday afternoon. I may want to leave at lunchtime Thursday to go attend an event that evening. So I am available then to do on it. Just make an appointment with me beforehand. Contact me and tell me you are coming. Wednesday, I should be there Wednesday afternoon, but I'm not sure. Wednesday morning, I will be off campus, depending on the weather. Now, all this could change slightly, like Thursday morning could change, because I think Thursday is probably a rain day. Thursday morning, my leadership walker class is going to do our project that we have to do as part of the training that we've been getting this year. And we're going to add some things to and plant a tree at the children's playground or little play area. Their little area off of the children's area on the Walker County Library. We're going to add some musical instruments on the fence, put some chalkboards in, plant a tree, and that may be about it. And so we assume we'll be done pretty quickly on that. We're going to get there at 8 o'clock, and our definite plan is to be out of there hopefully by 10 o'clock or soon thereafter when the library opens, so the kids can come out and take advantage of it. So I will be doing that Thursday morning, and the college sent me to the leadership walker training, so that is part of my work. I was on it last week. The next time I'll be out all day for it will be during y'all's break, after the end of the semester, the Tuesday after the semester ends. So next week, collaborate session on Wednesday, not on Monday, and that will be the last collaborate session for the semester. Because the following Wednesday is the last day of class, and then the finals are due on that Thursday. Graduation is that night, and I probably have to have grades in since finals are on Wednesday and Thursday. I'm assuming grades will be due on Monday, but that's definite reason. No, they're on Thursday and Friday, so I know grades will be due on Monday, because finals could be given on Thursday and Friday. So your final will be available for the regular part of it, the written part, as I'll call it written. It's really not written, but it's the part that you do just like your other test. It'll be twice as long, and it will be comprehensive. And it will be available from not this coming Saturday, but the next Saturday through that Thursday. So that you can take it at any time during that point. So from Saturday, April the 30th through Thursday, May the 5th. So do be aware of those. Your lab final is out there now. And y'all can, I don't remember in your class, if y'all, in your class you're going to create a packet tracer. You're going to go in and put in the equipment like they want it, and then you're going to do all the work they want. It does not self-grade, but y'all have already seen several that were that way. It will save as a .pkt, not pka type file, because it's a packet tracer file. It's not a packet tracer activity file. Activity files have directions and may have scoring, etc. added into them. You're creating it, so no, it doesn't have that part. So that is out there that y'all can go ahead and work on now. And then the course feedback at Cisco, which it will make you do before you can take the final exam, is available at this point also. It should still be. Several of these things have only let me open them up for 7 days at a time, and I'm not sure which one is which. And so if it's not there when you go out to do it, send me an email and I'll get it go out there and activate it as soon as possible. I think I have them all activated with multiple activations through the end of the semester for the things that are 7 days. Other things I can activate for 30 days, but they've got some things that I'm limited on activations. I am in the process of starting to transfer grades. One of the things I will do real quickly once I get to the school, is go over to check my mail, because I know at least one person says their permission slip is sitting in my mailbox over there. And then I will work on grading through the rest of the day. Any questions on all of that, of where we're coming up to as we're coming up to the end of the semester? The other part is, while y'all can be asking me questions, is that registration is underway now. If you are going to attend classes in the summer, and you have not registered yet, you need to register as soon as possible. I will be glad to assist you. If you're a cyber security student, you definitely need to get with either Mr. Spurlock or me for which courses to take in the summer, so that you can get your maximum benefits from the program. And any of you that are CIST, and actually if you're a business or whatever, I'll be glad to try to help you. But if you're a CIST student, I can definitely help you and give you definite advice on it. And all of you should be CIST students. But I will be glad to advise and register any of you that are in any of the CIST programs, be that web design, networking, which is actually my program of specialty, cybersecurity, which is one I also do heavily, and computer support. And I actually teach classes in all 4 of those programs. So I am involved in them all. Cybersecurity, the way we've got it set up, is a little trickier. So some of the other advisors do not know exactly as well on it or realize how important it is to get that students take specific courses, and that one is much more of courses are only offered once a year in a lot of cases. So that's why I tell you to talk to either Mr. Spurlock or me, as we're the 2 cybersecurity instructors. And as you know, I'm the one that's got cybersecurity certifications, because I just got renewed my Security Plus along with my Network Plus certifications just last week. And in relation to the computer support, I'm taking training on A+ right now, which actually I'm already certified twice in with lifetime certifications. And I'm learning about the latest A+ certification on how to teach it. I started last week and runs for 4 more weeks for the first test. And then there will be 5 to 6 weeks additional training for the second test. And then I'll take those tests along there. Data Plus, I will take that one as soon as I get the voucher. And I think I will do well on that one. So we'll wait and see. And so those are, so then if I pass those 2 A+ ones, then I'll have the new type A+ certification in addition to my other 2. It's only good for 3 years and it expires after 3 years, or you have to renew it. My other 2 are lifetime A+ certifications. One I got in December 97, and one of them I got in, I think, 2004. That's off the top of my head. No, I took one test in 2004, passed it, but didn't have a chance to take the other test. That would have been in 2008 when I taught it for Chattooga High School for a group of students there that were dual enrolled, and I taught it at the high school. And when they finished, the high school bought them vouchers, and not all of them used their vouchers, and the high school told me, go ahead and use the vouchers myself, because I took the students to go take the test in Jasper, I think it was. And so the second day I took one test and they took the other test. The first day I just sat there and watched them, but we were short a couple of, at least 1 or 2 students, and they said they weren't going to do it. And the school said, okay, we bought them anyway. And when I said about taking it to know, and that way when I rode back with the students that day, I could talk with them better. So any questions on all of that? I see nothing has popped up yet. So, and remember, you do have to put stuff in. So we are in chapter 15 this week. We actually have reached the top of the TCP, IP, and OSI models here in chapter 15. 16 will be about security, and 17 is building a small network. So that's what we'll be doing next week. So in this chapter, it's labeled application layer. Well, that's application layer in terms of TCP IP. If y'all remember from back in chapter 3, that the TCP IP model has 4 layers and OSI has 7 layers, and that it combined the top 3 layers of the OSI model as 1 layer in the TCP IP model. And then it also combined the bottom 2 layers into 1 also, but that's not what we're worried about right here. So this chapter is looking at the application layer as far as TCP IP is concerned, and as far as OSI is concerned, it's looking at application, presentation, and session layers. And no matter where you go to study these layers, these are the three, and I'm going to talk more probably in terms of OSI on it, terminology, that these layers don't receive much coverage at all. If you remember, layer 3, we actually spent several chapters on, about 3 chapters on layer 3. So some layers have a lot more things that get covered in them in an introduction to computers. And some, there's not as much stuff there. So these 3 layers just don't get much coverage, no matter where you look at them, of the application, presentation, and session layer. The application layer, remembers, all it's doing is connecting the networking to your application. But the application layer is not your application. It's the connector of the networking to the application. So that's what it's going to be doing. The presentation layer is going to be in terms of either, if it's stuff coming from the application, it's going to be taking it from the format that the application had it in, for instance, a DOC or DOCX or a Word document or and so on, and converting it over into a format that the network will understand. So it's just changing the file into a format, changing the format of the file to fit the network coming from the application. We'll have several other things occur on that layer also. Compression and encryption will occur there too, so there's definite things happening there. And when you come back up as you're finishing, stuff's arrived on the end where it's supposed to be, and it's coming up the model. Obviously, it will decompress it if it needs to decompress it, de-encrypt it if it needs to de-encrypt it. And by the way, most things will not allow you to encrypt and compress the same thing, although sometimes you can, but Windows will not. Just be aware of that one, that you can't compress a file and encrypt the file using Windows to do that, do both of those together. For the simple reason, compressing it's similar to encrypting it. The two are very close together what they're doing. So it would get all confusing on that, although you can do it. So you can zip a file and then it can get encrypted to get sent wherever. But you can't do it within Windows. That was a question I hit on MCSE several times and took me a little bit to catch on. And then I went, wait a minute. If you encrypt it, you've changed it to these different strange characters. It's using a code. If you compress it, you're squeezing stuff together. Now it looks like strange characters and using a code. So you're effectively doing the same type of thing, except encryption's a whole lot stronger. And then the other part is, as it comes up, besides decompressing or de-encrypting as it may need to, it will also change it into the format that the application will be expecting. The other one on the session layer is the session layer. So that's going to be more in terms of that was presentation layer. The session layer is actually going to make your connections and make sure they stay connected. So they spend very little time talking about the session layer. Because if you notice right here in your book or your online materials, it tells us it's talking about the session, the presentation and session layer. And then that's the header section title for the whole thing. And then there is nothing mentioned there about the session layer, but the session layer establishes the connection and then disconnects the session. My instructor that taught me this class, when I took the instructor training for it, he related the session layer as a way to remember what it does to a secretary, that it works like a secretary would work on it. And notice those both start with the letter S, which is what he told us, that was how he helped to remember it. That if you're a high up executive in an organization, you probably don't call other people. You pick up the phone and you tell your secretary to make the call, and then secretary calls, gets the other secretary, and they both establish, both CEOs or whatever are there, and so then they transfer the call to them, and the secretaries don't bother with it any further. And then when they reach the end of the conversation, they usually pass it back off to the secretaries and may tell them, okay, well, we're wanting to play golf one day and we're hoping next week. Check our calendars and see which day that we can play golf or whatever, or that we're going to have a meeting about this great new invention that somebody has come up with and we're looking at. And then it gets passed off to secretaries. Secretaries get that date set, put it on their calendars, and hang up and disconnects it. So that's in terms of the session layer. And that's about all you're going to know about session layer. So then application layer, they talk about protocols that are used there. They're going to come back and talk about them a little bit more, so I'm going to skip over that for a moment. Then they talk about the models, again, of how the networks are set up, and two basic models, peer-to-peer and client-server. And here the book is a little confusing too. They've got it under the major heading of peer-to-peer, and the first thing coming under peer-to-peer is they tell you about the client-server model. Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense right there, because peer-to-peer is one major model, client-server is the other major model. Well, that's all they spend on client-server, is just a one paragraph where basically they're reminding you what client-server is. Client-server says we've got a server, and then your clients are working off of that server. Your security information quite often is kept on that server. Your connection, etc., are made through that server. And so everything but that your security and that your way of connecting is done through the server from the clients. And so you don't have to worry about it on the individual machines, about how a lot of that stuff occurs of the security and all of that. Peer-to-peer is the other model, in which is actually, as far as today's type networking world, is used more. However, networking back when we had mainframes actually worked off of a more of a client-server model. They didn't work off of a peer-to-peer model. But when we started moving into the PCs and these small little separate machines, peer-to-peer appeared. Now, y'all may use peer-to-peer also out there on the internet, and I'll come back and mention that to you also, so which works the same way. Peer-to-peer says all of our machines are equal. There's not one machine that's more important than the others, that maintains our security, etc. Each machine maintains its own security. And so you have to set up on each machine what usernames are permissible on it, what all the passwords are, and all of that. And then if you go and change somebody's password and they use multiple machines, you got to go to multiple machines and change the password there. And if they access to multiple machines, you got to make sure the security's set right where they can still access the things they're going to access. So peer-to-peer says all our machines are equal. Client server, remember, is maintained on a central server to it all. So peer-to-peer, each machine decides what it wants to share and keeps up with all of its security type things, and each one's responsible on its own. In Windows, that's where you see work groups. A work group is peer-to-peer networking. You've said that this machine is being looked as equal with its peers or the other machines. And a lot of times you do have your computers running both peer-to-peer and client-server, so that you may be able to share something with somebody else that's sharing your little office with you, and that you also got it set up in a client server for the logons and everything else. But the problem with peer-to-peer is that if you've got lots of machines on your network, trying to update your security, maintain other stuff, update passwords gets very confusing. What only in Windows? Peer-to-peer is used everywhere. Peer-to-peer will work on any operating system. Client server will also work on your different operating systems, although a lot of the times out there in the world today, when you're doing client server, you're using a Windows machine as your server for that purpose. Did that answer what you were asking? Okay, so with peer-to-peer, they're all equals, and each machine is responsible for maintaining its security and keeping it all up to date. You've got lots of peer-to-peer applications out there, and you'll see it as P2P also out there. But probably for most of y'all, instant messaging is an example of peer-to-peer, but probably for a number of you in this class, and not me on it, other than what I've learned about it, is that gaming. Oh, some of the games out there are done in a peer-to-peer approach, so that you're doing peer-to-peer across the internet. So you can do peer-to-peer on the internet also. Another one is used in peer-to-peer is when you get onto some of these music sharing or video sharing sites. A lot of them are peer-to-peer to try to get around legal problems. So if you own have a copy of some song, that you put it out there in some program available for others to get, and they'll come get it off your machine. Not putting it out there on a server, you're sharing it from your machine and others access to your machine to get it. You want to get a song, you go find it, and it's on Susie's machine, and it grabs it from Susie, who may be over in England, Britain. And you may grab another song, and it's sitting on Joe's machine in France, and so on. And that each of you is responsible for keeping up on that. The reason a lot of that is done on that way is because actually you're violating copyright laws probably, and by putting them each machine sharing it out, it makes it very difficult for anybody to ever crack down on it. If you had a central server, the people that own these things, the musicians that own that music or whoever they've sold it off to, and the owners of the videos and stuff, and would come and shut that machine down, which they have done in the past. And that was how some of the original music sharing and video sharing occurred, was people set up these big machines and were sharing off of that to the world using a client server more approach. And they got in all kinds of trouble. Some of them actually went to jail. So now it's done in terms of peer-to-peer usually to get around on that. I'm not telling you to do that. It is illegal for most of it. Some songs are public domain or completely doable on it. Videos, and that's what YouTube is always checking on, because they are a client server approach to it. And when you upload a video out there, they actually are checking it to see if you've got illegal things that actually YouTube's not doing it. They do checking on it, but you've got a lot of places that run things against it and have developed programs to check to see if there's anything in these videos being uploaded that is part of something they supposedly own the copyright to. If you do get flagged as a copyright for uploading to YouTube, one, I'd check to see if you do have a license to upload it to YouTube, to broadcast it out. And two, whoever complained look and see whether or not what they claim you got as a violation of in your video is actually a violation. When I was uploading full church services up there for the last few years, we quit doing full service, went back to sermons. Back in March, we dropped our full copyright license. Every week, there was copyright owners in Brazil and several other places that would file infringement complaints against me, and YouTube would tell me I couldn't collect money on it, which I wasn't trying to do anyway. Wasn't. And that they were, if the complaint got upheld, it was going to cut it out of my presentation. I would look and see, it was singing hymns in church. I would look up the hymns and find that they were in public domain quite often. Now, there was a few things that they did flag on that was, and I pulled those back out and usually knew that beforehand, and would leave it out of the video in the first place. But I would file a complaint back, because they actually have a process to do that, and say, we got copyright license. And also that this, and I had that published on the videos, the copyright license numbers, and that song that they were claiming I was copyright violation, they did not own the copyright to. You know what the oddest part was? They were then given 30 days to respond, and my stuff worked, but had a warning on it that there was a copyright violation possibly. They never would respond back to them, and so they died. They're out there trying to, what they're wanting is that if mine had been a money producer, they got the money for it those 30 days, which, or until I filed the complaint. And so I'd file a complaint immediately, but they would get the money from any monies made on it they would get, and I don't think they really even owned the copyrights, that they'd figured out how to do that. So be aware of that. BitTorrent is an example of it. They mention about some games and stuff that are peer-to-peer also. No, you got to have permission to use on them in there, or pay them if necessary. So even if you give full credit there. Now in papers, when you all are writing papers, you can do short quotations from articles and papers you're writing with full credit given to the author. And you don't have to pay on that. But if you do substantial pulling of it, you have to contact the author publisher about paying to use that. But in a video, if you're going to use songs in there that are copyrighted, and there's lots of songs out there public domain, yes, you can use those without having to do anything on it. Some you should acknowledge on it. But most songs are copyrighted. So if we were going to let you include the Beatles song Forever, and we're include section of the Beatles singing it, we would have to pay the Beatles for that, or Apple actually. And Apple may have sold their stuff to Michael Jackson. I think before Michael Jackson died, I think he owns the copy. He owned it, so his family, unless they sold it off, I'm not sure if they sold off that whole big catalog, because Michael Jackson owned the most copyrights of music in the world. All right, now let's go through some protocols, and we'll go through these pretty rapidly because most of these I have mentioned before. So I'm just going to mention them to you again real briefly right here. So they talk about web and email protocols. They talk first about the web ones. Two protocols there. We've talked about these, I'm quite sure, before, but I'll mention them real quickly to you. It's HTTP, and there's HTTP. And the HTTP is using HTML files, which is hypertext markup language files. So they go through, show you how that works briefly. They mentioned about HTTP, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and HTTPS, which is Secure HTTP. Yes, the S is on the end, secure words at the beginning. And the difference between those two is with HTTPS, the stuff is going across encrypted across the network. With HTTP, it is open text, it's plain text, and anybody can read it as it goes across. And so they mentioned those to you real briefly, show you a tiny bit on that. Email protocols, I'm quite sure we talked about these before, but we'll mention them again right here. SMTP, POP, and IMAP. SMTP, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, is used to send your emails, and that's used in both of the other cases. If you're going to send email, it's always using SMTP. So you have to set up, when you're setting up an email client, you do have to set up who the SMTP server is. So that's used to send emails. POP is not used as much today. It was the way of receiving emails for the longest time. It's Post Office Protocol. Version 3 is what we're on, so you'll see POP 3 quite often is mentioned for POP. And what it says is when you go to look at your emails, and this goes back to before the 2000 or right thereafter, at that point we moved to IMAP. But with POP, you pulled your messages off the server down to your machine, and then you could read them on your machine. But you moved them from the server to your machine, and that meant if I checked my email, school email, right here at home, I pulled them down onto the machine here, and they weren't on the server. Although I had an option, I could click a box and say, leave them on the server, but then they didn't show whether I'd read them or not read them if they still sat out on the server. So when I got to school, if I didn't check that box, they weren't there and I couldn't see them. If I did, I could pull them down, but you had to pull them down to your machine and then you worked with it on your machine. You did not work with them on the server. So POP is still out there, but it's not used much. And you'll actually see it if any of y'all are using Yahoo type emails like att.net, the old Bell South, or the Yahoo. They actually have a POP choice in there. Gmail, I do not think includes POP in it, and Gmail actually got developed after IMAP was fully developed. IMAP leaves your messages on the server. You work with them on the server, and that they're not downloaded to your machine. So I can work on my email here at the house and answer them, get to school, and it shows me immediately which emails I've already read, including the ones I read here from home. It shows me on my computer at school because all of that stuff is occurring on the server. And so again, IMAP is for reading and looking at our emails. POP was also. People will still use POP today to download their emails at certain times to get them all stored on their local machine also. So, but your POP's not used very much, so I wouldn't worry a whole lot about that one. Questions on the email or web stuff on there so far? All right, next one is DNS. I know we talked about DNS before because that came up back there earlier on. They go through and talk about domain name service again here, the DNS, talk about how it's done. Remember, it looks at your host file and sees if there, remember, DNS takes a domain name and finds the IP address. If it doesn't know what's the IP address for that domain name, it then sends it to the DNS server. And if it doesn't know, it sends it to the next level server, and it goes up about 5 levels. There's about 5 root servers in the world. But whichever layer it finds it on, it then tells every layer coming back down about the IP address for it. So you don't go to those higher level servers very often. That somebody somewhere along the way has already gotten there, so it's been found. That's why they do tell you when you register a domain name or change a forwarder on it, they'll say it may take up to 24 hours before it takes effect, is how soon it can get through the systems on it. So domain DNS is just a method to find our IP addresses for our domain names. They talk about that they're in DNS. There's A records, NS records, 4A records, and MX records. I'll mention the MX one first. That says that if this was a mail message, that identifies MX, identifies the mail server so that it knows which is the mail server to use. That's MAIL. And then the A records are IP version 4 identifiers of what is the IP address for this domain name. And that's an IP version 4. The quad A is for IP version 6 addresses. So it'll most likely nowadays in DNS, it will have both an A and a quad A, because that whatever server that domain name is referenced to will have both an IP version 4 and an IP version 6 address. And then the NS one is the authoritative name server, and that's saying here's the name server that actually gave us this information to keep on here. And so that keeps the authoritative one on it. So they mention again about the hierarchy on DNS and about the fact you've got a domain name, Dwight and the dwightwatt.com, and then you've got the high level one on it, which was the .com. Used to be just a few of those on the extension. Now there's a whole bunch of them, and you can actually make your own domain name extension. You have to pay a good bit of money to do that, but you can do that. The Washington Post uses .ost. So on their domain, that they always have them finish with the letter P so that it then comes out with something post. The NS lookup command will allow you to go out and look to see what all the settings are for a specific domain name or that you've got there. And so you can look up specific domain names and get the information on them for you to look at. And that's what the NS lookup. They then talk about DHCP. We've mentioned that one before, but DHCP is Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. We've been using it since the late 90s. Actually, it goes back a little bit before that, but they're in the late 90s. What it does is by using DHCP, you have a DHCP server that you put all of the addresses that can be used by the host on your network, and you put them in what's called pools. So basically a pool of addresses. You can also have a pool of excluded addresses, also addresses they are not to use in DHCP. Then when a machine comes on, it makes a request for an address, the DHCP server, so that's a discover, then the DHCP server replies back with an offer, where it sends it an address and says, here's an offer. Both of those are broadcast because there's no IP address on that client at that point. And every machine sees it. So multiple DHCP servers could respond if you had several on your network. And the other part is when the offer is made, everybody sees the offer. And if some machine, for some reason, is already using that number, it can send out a message of, no, you can't use that. I already got it. That shouldn't occur if you've done your network correctly. And then, so that's what the offer, and then the client will choose the one it wants to use. Probably only one come in, but if it got several offers, it would choose one of the offers and send back a request to use that address. And then at that point, the DHCP server will send back an acknowledgement, and at that point, that address belongs to that machine. Now, remember their leases. By default, the lease for a name, for an address, is 8 days. After 4 days, they'll send out notices of, do you want to renew this? Do you want to renew this? It sends it after half the time, and then it'll send it in half of the remaining time, and so on down, on giving machines chances to renew, which they normally will. ipconfig will allow you to see what all that stuff is, but also it has switches on it that will allow you to clear it and wipe it out. File sharing, they mentioned the 2 big ones on that for you at this point. And I think this is the end of the chapter. So the big one that you really need to be aware of on file sharing services is FTP for File Transfer Protocol. Remember that you will use FTP programs to work with FTP protocol. So FTP can be File Transfer Protocol or program. We're talking about protocol in this chapter. And that is our method of transferring data between 2 machines. And remember, it is using TCP, and that with FTP, it is making sure it is fully delivered, and it has to go through with the windowing approach. So you use FTP quite often. FTP can be used through an FTP client, or you can actually use your web browser as an FTP client too. Just put an FTP : and the address where you're wanting to transfer files to or from. Service message block is another way to do it, to transfer them. I will tell you this, they mentioned it several times through the book, but it's been around since forever, just like FTP has. But I have very seldom ever seen any questions relate to SMB or service message block. All right, that is the chapter there, and it looks like we've taken close to 50 minutes so far. I will answer any questions y'all may have at this point. And FileZilla is a good example of an FTP program. And there's plenty of others out there. That you can be using those. I want to make sure. Yeah. Okay. So you can be using a number of different programs for FTP. And we're talking about FTP right here, and not where we talked in the previous chapter about TFTP, which was Trivial File Transfer Protocol. This chapter, I think y'all probably knew a little bit about it. You learned about parts of it all through the book already anyway. So I don't think this chapter is as challenging for you. Likewise, the next 2 chapters, I think y'all will find easier also. Next chapter will be security. Those of you that have taken 1601, it should definitely be a review. Those of you that are taking 2601, it should definitely be review for you, an easier level than what you're doing in 2601. Some of you are taking 2601 and 2451 from me this semester. And then, so we're going to go through just some basic security things. Nothing advanced or anything to it, but basic security. But if you remember a couple of weeks ago, y'all had a discussion question. Well, y'all wouldn't remember, but students that are listening to this on the recording may remember that did the discussion instead of doing the collaborate. And most of y'all have done the live collaborate every week. But there was a discussion on something about security, and I had students write me back and go, what's this got to do with this class? We're not learning about security. Yeah, you're learning about security as we go along the way too. We've talked about it in terms of FTP and TFTP, for instance, and we've mentioned other things. We're going to go through some basic little things on security in the next chapter. If y'all go to the 3rd Cisco course, 2453, that one will throw some more setting up your network securely. And then the last chapter next week that we'll go over briefly will be about how to set up a small network. So that would be like a home network or a small office network where there's only a few devices. Back to peer-to-peer. I did leave one thing out I meant to say, and I realized I didn't say. Normally, you only use peer-to-peer when you're setting up a local network. Now, this isn't where we talked about sharing files, games, etc., playing games, etc., peer-to-peer across the internet. This is within just setting up your local little network. People will quite often set up local networks peer-to-peer. If you're only going to have 10 or fewer machines, peer-to-peer will work perfectly fine. If you have more than 10 machines, most things tell you go client server, but you got to buy a server. So you got to have a server to learn that. That gets a little bit more expensive. So you can run your networks peer-to-peer, and that you will quite often find small networks. An organization that only has, usually 10 is the number used. I believe Microsoft likes the number 10, if I remember right. I didn't see it in here from Cisco. Some places say 15. So it's somewhere a number between 10 and 15 is the suggestion on no bigger than for a peer-to-peer network. And then if you're going to have more devices than that, go to a client server. For simple reason that trying to maintain the network becomes a huge work job trying to update and keep up with stuff on it. So peer-to-peer, normally think in terms of 10 or less, although if you saw a question and 10 wasn't the answer, look and see if 15 might fit there. It's not going to be 5, it's not going to be 20, 25. And usually the other answers are too big or too small. But the answer usually should be 10 to 15. Depending on who's setting the rules on it. And you don't have to be exact on that. If everybody says it's 10, if you went 11 or 12 machines, you're okay, but you're going to find your workloads increasing trying to maintain it, and that you need to get a server for them. When I did steel fabrication plant, it started off peer-to-peer. I think we had 5 machines running on it when I started there. We had about 15, 20 machines when I left, and we'd actually we got to have the other because it was they were spending more money on me maintaining it than they wanted to. So I believe, Mason, if I'm remembering correctly, I think we will touch on MPLS in the 3rd course, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on MPLS. But I believe, if I'm remembering with the current curriculum, we do touch on it in the 3rd course, but I'm not specific on that. So, but we'll go to related things and everything around it. Sorry about that, not having a more specific answer, but they keep moving stuff around. And besides that, I've had training through the first CCNP course, which is the next one after that, and that one was murder. And I've had some other security trainings from Cisco, which get off onto some of that other stuff too. Okay. Any other questions for me? Okay, it looks like we had some interesting little discussion today. We had some interaction going on here. So that was good for today. Interesting. It pops up and tells me I got 2 new chat messages, but won't let me see the last one. So I'm going to stop the recording, and I will see y'all next Wednesday, remember. So we will not meet next Monday. We will meet on Wednesday instead, and that will be the final Collaborate session for this semester. So that's it, because the following Wednesday, May the 4th, is the last day. I'll do the same times on Wednesday as I do on Monday. So this one will be at 10 o'clock again on Monday. Because when I move them from day to day, I try to stay exactly at the same time. So that the only thing that y'all have to think about, or I have to think about, it's for me too, is just that next week, Monday falls on Wednesday. Okay. So I'm going to stop the recording. And I will try to upload this later this afternoon. but I may or may not get that done because remember, I am going to be at Whitfield Murray from 4 to 7 o'clock, which means I got to leave over here at 3 and I got to collaborate at 2. And then I won't get home until after 8 o'clock. Actually, probably a little later because I'll have to get supper somewhere.